Most people have the general impression that bats are dangerous and ugly creatures of the night. Let's take a look at this and some of the other myths that have given this interesting and important animal its totally undeserved reputation. One of the most prevalent and absurd myths about bats is that they get stuck in people's hair and seem to do it intentionally. A bat spends a great deal of its life in a state of semi-hibernation. It must protect itself from predators and vandals during this vulnerable period. Most animals that hibernate bury themselves in the ground for protection, but the bat has the option to simply fly away from danger. The most efficient position from which a half-sleeping animal can launch itself into flight is hanging, head down. Evolution has provided the bat with feet and toes well adapted to this lifestyle, and some of the positions they take while sleeping leave one wondering how they ever get any rest. Extremely fine and well-groomed toenails give a bat the agility of a fly. In crawling about, the feet are also assisted by a hooked nail on the end of the thumb of the forepaw. The notion of being stuck probably derives from a very strong instinct not to let go until absolutely convinced of the need to leave. The myth that has caused our little friends the most grief is the belief that they attack people and suck their blood. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The vast majority of bats eat nothing but insects or fruit and have absolutely no interest in anything else. Bats are actually very docile and unaggressive animals with little tendency to bite even in self-defense. Stories of people being attacked by bats are usually nothing more than a close encounter with a bat in hot pursuit of a flying insect. When stripped of Hollywood's nonsense, even the tropical American vampire bat, which does eat blood, becomes about as dangerous as a big mosquito. What Hollywood doesn't tell us about vampires is that they drink less than a teaspoonful of blood at one feeding. This is rarely enough to injure even the smallest animals that they feed on. The only potential threat posed is the possibility of spreading blood-borne diseases, but this pales in comparison to the diseases spread by mosquitoes and wood ticks. No one seems to know where the expression "blind as a bat" came from, but their ability to get around in the dark is truly astonishing. They can catch insects on the wing and fly around in a room in total darkness without ever touching a wall. Like the porpoise and the whale, the bat uses a system called echolocation. He sends out loud clicks and analyzes the returning echoes for distance, size, and texture. If it sounds like trouble, he evades it. If it sounds like food, he pursues it. The bat's method of spatial orientation eluded researchers for years because, unlike the porpoise, the bat's vocalizations are above the range of the human ear. It took modern electronics to solve the mystery. This microphone detects the very high frequencies emitted by bats and translates them down to low-frequency clicks which we can hear. What we are hearing now is known as search mode calling. These are random clicks sent off in different directions in search of food or orientation information. The rate of clicking depends on the distance to the target or obstacle. The closer it is, the faster the clicks. But it is the wing of the bat that makes him truly unique among mammals. Aside from Dumbo, the only mammal capable of true flight is the bat. The bat wing evolved from the forepaw of a shrew-like animal by elongation of the fingers. These are connected to each other and to the body by a hairless membrane similar to the webbing of a duck's foot. Because a bat depends upon its wings for its very survival, much attention is paid to maintenance. Cleaning and grooming of the wing membranes occupies a considerable portion of a bat's daily resting period. One of the most important services provided by bats is their voracious consumption of insects of all kinds. The best way to get a feel for this pest control service is to visit a large bat colony. One of the largest in the world is Bracken Cave near San Antonio, Texas. This cave contains over 20 million bats during the summer, and seeing them in action is one of nature's most incredible shows. What we are witnessing here is the most colossal rush hour traffic on Earth. If bats were people, the entire populations of New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Tokyo would be passing through this cave entrance every day. It is also interesting to note that never, while standing in the midst of this bustling mass, is an observer ever bitten or bothered in any way. They may bump into you, but they simply fall to the ground, scramble back into the air, and head on out. Their only desire is to get to the feeding grounds. This may seem like a simple task, but when you consider that it takes more than 3 hours for the last bat to get out and just as long to get back in, it leaves precious little time for the slowpokes to feed. Furthermore, they frequently fly 50 miles or more to the feeding grounds. Much of the fear of bats can be traced to their nocturnal habits. Because of the difficulty of studying animals that are active only at night, far less is known about them. Human beings throughout history have feared what they did not understand. The bat is active at night for two very good reasons. First of all, there is little competition for night-flying insects. Secondly, nighttime provides protection from many predators. Long before daylight, bats start returning to the cave area. Millions of them swarm near the entrance, and at first sign of light, they begin to enter with the rush of a freight train. After the initial horde has entered, the stragglers gather in large groups high over the cave entrance. Upon some unknown command, they fold up their wings and dive straight in, making a sound like they were zipping up for the night. Exploring caves always brings to mind adventure and excitement, but a few words of caution are in order regarding large bat colonies. Disturbing bats that are nursing young or hibernating can cause them severe distress. From a human standpoint, the atmosphere in a cave can be lethal because of the high levels of decomposing guano. The proper respirator is absolutely essential for safety. A bat cave provides an excellent opportunity to study the wonderful balance of nature. Contrary to popular notion, a bat's main defense against danger is to take flight. And just like people fleeing from a burning building, the young, the old, and the weak end up on the ground. Those unable to regain a safe roost face certain death from a surprising variety of predators. There are always a number of characters waiting around for just such an opportunity. This coach-whip snake is in the final process of swallowing a bat whole. But these are relatively minor actors in the overall ecology of a bat colony. By far, the most important predators of fallen bats are insects. The domestic beetle and its larvae swarm over anything that cannot outrun their hordes. Within minutes, they can strip a bat of fur and flesh and leave nothing but bones. Cave crickets are also important members of the recycling team. It is an interesting irony for an animal that spends its entire life eating insects to end up feeding them. But all North American bats are insectivorous. That is, they eat only insects. Their importance to the ecology becomes obvious with a few simple calculations. A bat consumes about 1/2 its weight in insects every night. For a colony of this size, that adds up to about 250,000 pounds of moths, mosquitoes, and other night-flying insects. These little bats return every morning with the equivalent of 23 full-grown elephants in insects. And if that were not enough, they turn these insects into bat guano, one of the richest natural fertilizers in the world. Although the labor required to extract guano makes it hard to compete with petroleum-based fertilizers, the current move toward organic gardening has generated renewed interest in mining it. And as the bats only occupy these caves during the summer maternity season, the guano can be removed in the winter without disturbing them. Guano from Texas caves was largely responsible for turning Southern California into the fruit basket of America. Bat guano was also used during the Civil War to make nitrates for gunpowder. Contrary to popular notions, bats don't always live in caves. This bridge in Austin, Texas is home to over 100,000 bats. They seem to find the expansion caps very much to their liking and occupy them over the entire length of the bridge. Many bats just kind of hang around in crawl spaces, attics, and other unoccupied parts of human habitations. In the vast majority of cases, the primary inhabitants are not even aware of the bats, let alone bothered by them. Many tropical trees die from the inside out. Although presenting a real challenge for a photographer, The hollow trunks provide year-round homes for bats. This particular tree had 3 different species of bats living in it. And of course, no garden would be complete without its bat house. One of the little understood facts about bats is their sheer numbers. In a tropical forest such as this, about 50% of the mammal biomass is made up of bats. In other words, if we weighed all of the mammals from shrews to elephants and everything in between, like this 2-toed sloth, about half of the total weight would be bats. Furthermore, bats represent about 25% of all mammal species. These are startling facts, considering that the average person probably has never even seen a bat in the wild. It also points out the difficulties involved in doing useful research on bats. One of the tools used by scientists studying bats is the mist net. This resembles a fishing net that is set up in an area frequented by bats. Their sonar is not quite sophisticated enough to detect the fine mesh, and the bats get entangled in them. Disentangling them from the net sometimes requires the patience and persistence of a saint. Once free of the net, the bat is identified, counted, checked for parasites and diseases, and any other information desired, and then released. Releasing them is sometimes easier said than done. This little fruit bat doesn't seem to know when it's well off. Of the 850 species of bats in the world, the vast majority of them are insectivorous. The diets of the rest vary widely and include such things as frogs, fish, birds, blood, other bats, fruit, and flower nectar. Ecologically, the fruit and nectar-eating bats are possibly the most important mammals in the world. The fruit-eating bats are extremely important as seed dispersers of tropical fruits. To minimize the weight they have to carry around, they typically spit out the roughage after swallowing the juices of the fruit they eat. If seeds are ingested, they are defecated later as they fly about. In this way, the seeds of heavy fruits are moved and planted far away from the parent tree. Fruit-eating bats are the Johnny Appleseeds of the jungle. An equally important service provided by bats is the pollination of the flowers of tropical trees. Many tropical trees have very long tubular flowers whose nectar is inaccessible to insects. A number of bats have evolved long, slender tongues to reach into these flowers. In the process of satisfying their hunger, they are dusted with pollen, which they transfer to the next flower they visit. The mucuna fruit is a favorite food of monkeys and depends on bats for pollination. When the flower is bitten in a certain way, it pops open and sprays the bat with pollen. Insects are not strong enough to provide the proper bite. A close look at this strange-looking fruit reveals the familiar cashew nut, which depends on bats for pollination. Bats are also pollinators of the desert agave, or century plant. the source of the liquor tequila and sisal and manila rope fibers. This bizarre thing won't bite, scratch, or purr. It is the fruit of the bat-pollinated balsa tree. Hundreds of species of trees and plants depend upon bats for pollination and seed dispersal. A list of products that would not exist without bats contains some very familiar items. A proper understanding of the role of bats in both ecology and economy lead us to suspect that they are possibly the most important animals on Earth. Only by abandoning traditional views will it become clear that a bat's only need is a few good friends.